Kansas Territory, June 1873, the wind howled across the plains like it had a score to settle, and Nolan McCrae rode straight into it, dust in his beard and a rifle slung across his back. He had not planned to stop at the broken-down barn off the main trail, but his horse, Cooper, had slowed without asking. The animal's ears twitched. That was when Nolan heard a faint, sharp rattle of iron against wood, not wind, not storm, something, or someone. He stepped down from the saddle, boots crunching dry weeds. The barn was half collapsed, timbers warped, its doorway sagging. No livestock, no wagons, no scent of hay. Just silence and that sound again, metal clinking, weak but steady. Nolan pushed the door open. The inside stank of rot and heat. Light spilled through gaps in the walls. In the back, near an old feed trough, he saw her. A woman, young, wild-eyed, wrists chained to a support beam with rusted iron. Her dress was torn and dirty, her hair tangled down her back. She did not flinch when he stepped closer. She just stared at him like she had already decided he was not real. "Hey," Nolan said gently, kneeling. "You hurt." Her lips were cracked. "Who are you?" "Nolan McCrae. I was just passing through." He glanced at the chains. "I heard the noise. I came to look." "I've been here 3 days," she whispered. He saw the bruises on her arms, the dried blood near her elbow. Her breath hitched when she shifted. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Henley." "Henley Sutton." "All right, Henley." He pulled a knife from his belt and slid it into the rusted chain link. It took 3 tries and her wrists were raw before the last piece gave way. She sagged forward, but he caught her, one arm around her back. "You're safe now." She shook her head. "No." "They'll come back." "Who?" he asked. "My uncle, my aunt. They locked me up for running off again. They said I was wild, not fit to be around their boys." Her voice cracked. "But I just wanted to ride, to breathe, that is all." Nolan's jaw tightened. "They do this often," Henley nodded. "Each time worse than the last. This time they said they would leave me here to teach me a lesson." He helped her stand, slow and careful. "You are not going back there. You do not know them." "I do not need to. I saw enough." Henley's legs buckled and Nolan caught her again. She leaned into him, trembling. "I tried to get free. I screamed the first night until my voice went. Then I stopped hoping." "You are not alone anymore," he said. He lifted her into his saddle, mounted behind her, and wrapped his arms around her waist to steady her. She said nothing as they rode, her head resting back against his chest. The sun dipped low behind them, casting long shadows across the grass. Nolan took her to his cabin, a quiet place tucked against the edge of the Flint Hills, where the land rolled wild and wide. He laid her on the cot and gave her water. She drank like she had been crawling through sand. "You live alone?" she asked. "I do. My pa left it to me after he passed. I do some stock work, fix fences. Keep to myself." Henley looked around. The room was small but clean, with a stove in the corner and a shelf of books worn at the edges. "You are kind," she said softly. "I just did what was right. No one ever has before." He looked at her then, really looked, not at the bruises or the dirt, but at the steel in her eyes. She was not broken, even after all that. She had not given up. "You hungry?" he asked. She nodded. That night, over beans and cornbread, she told him more. About her uncle's ranch, how they took her in after her parents died in a fire when she was 15. How she never fit the mold they wanted: quiet, obedient, small. She had always been drawn to horses, to open land, to anything that made her feel free. "They hated that," she said. "Said I was wild, that no man would ever want me if I kept acting like I had opinions." Nolan leaned back in his chair. "Then they were fools." She looked away, but he saw the flicker of something in her eyes, something unsure, maybe even hope. He gave her his bed that night and slept on the floor near the door. She did not argue. In the morning, she walked outside barefoot, the wind tugging at her hair. He watched her from the porch as she turned her face up toward the sun like she was trying to memorize the sky. "You ever break a horse?" he asked, stepping beside her. She smiled for the first time. "Every chance I got," he nodded. "Then I could use your help." And just like that, something shifted. They spent the next week fixing fence lines and tending to stock. She rode beside him, laughed when the colt nipped his hat clean off, and fell asleep by the fire with her head against his shoulder more than once. Each evening she stayed longer outside, walking farther from the house, not afraid anymore. He never asked her to stay. She never asked to leave. One night after the dishes were put away, she looked at him across the table. "I do not want to go back," she said. "You do not have to," Nolan said. "I mean ever. I want to build something different, something real." "You could do that here," he said. "With me," her breath caught. "I have nothing," she said. "You have everything that matters," he replied. She stood, walked around the table and sat beside him. Her hand found his. She did not say anything else. She did not have to. The morning broke slow and lavender gray, with the sound of wind brushing through the cottonwoods near the creek. Henley stood in the doorway of Nolan's cabin, her arms folded across her chest, watching the line of hills where the sun had not yet touched. Her hair was clean now, braided down her back in a thick rope, still damp from washing in the tin basin out back. She wore one of Nolan's old shirts belted at the waist, sleeves rolled past her elbows, and his spare pair of work trousers cinched high with rope. Nolan stepped down from the loft, tugging on his boots. "You always rise so early?" she asked without turning. "Habit," he said. "Cattle don't wait," she glanced over her shoulder. "I'd like to help again." He paused beside the stove, struck the match to light the fire beneath the kettle. "There's a roan gelding up in the north pasture, needs gentling." "He's high-headed, doesn't trust a rope." She turned fully, face unreadable. "What happened to him?" "His dam died the week he was weaned. He's never known steady hands." She nodded once. "I'll try." They rode out after breakfast, Nolan showing her the shortcut through the stone breaks where the soil held better. The roan stood alone near the far fence, eyes sharp, tail flicking. Henley dismounted before they reached him and approached slowly, quiet as smoke. Nolan stayed back near the fence post, watching as she crouched low and murmured something he couldn't hear. The horse tossed his head, but didn't bolt. Henley uncoiled the lead rope from her belt, careful not to raise it, and let it drag beside her. She moved like someone who didn't need to prove anything, just wanted to be understood. After 15 minutes, her hand was on the roan's neck. "Don't call him a brute," she said later, tying the gelding to the hitch rail beside the barn. "He's not mean, just forgotten." Nolan wiped dust from his palms. "I didn't call him anything. You were thinking it." "I was thinking he hadn't let anyone close before." She gave a small nod, then looked down at her hands. The skin was torn along one knuckle, blood dark under the nail. She didn't mention it. That afternoon, Nolan took her to the edge of the creek where a stand of cottonwood shaded the water. He needed to check the fish traps set the week prior. Henley waded in beside him, hem of her trousers rolled high, water cold around their ankles. "You ever think about going somewhere else?" she asked suddenly, crouching beside a trap. He lifted the woven slats, empty. "I did once. Tried Colorado, mining camp near Silver Plume." "Why'd you come back?" "Didn't like how fast everything moved." "Too many men chasing gold, not enough tending to what matters." She looked at him, blinking against the sun. "And what matters to you?" He didn't answer right away. He checked the next trap instead, pulling up 2 fat perch. When he spoke, his voice was lower. "Steady ground, quiet nights." "Someone who wants the same." Henley didn't smile, but something in her face softened. She picked up one of the fish, held it firm in both hands, then laid it in the bucket without a word. That evening they cooked over the fire pit outside, the fish sizzling on the iron griddle. Henley seasoned it with salt and dried wild onion Nolan had in his small pantry, her fingers working with practiced ease. "Where'd you learn to cook like that?" he asked. "From a woman who lived near my family's place in Tennessee," she said. "She was Choctaw, took pity on me when I was small. Said if I didn't learn to make something edible, I'd starve before I turned 20. You miss it there?" "No," she said, "but I miss her." They ate in quiet after that, the kind of silence that didn't press down, just made room. When the stars rose, Henley didn't go inside. She sat by the fire, knees drawn up, staring into the coals. "Do you think people can change?" she asked, voice low. I think people show who they are when no one's looking. The rest is just noise. She let that sit a while. My uncle made me believe I was broken, not just wild, but wrong. Like I was some curse laid on the family. Nolan's gaze didn't leave her. You believe him? I did, for years. And now, she met his eyes then, steady. Now I'm not sure he ever saw me at all. The flames cracked between them. Nolan reached toward the fire, added another log. His fingers brushed hers when he drew his hand back, and this time she didn't pull away. You don't have to be anything but what you are, he said. I don't know what that is yet. That's all right. She leaned toward him, just enough that their shoulders touched. The moment held quiet, solid. Not rushed, not uncertain. I want to stay, she said. Then stay. By late July, the land had turned gold and brittle. Grass cracked underfoot, and the pond behind the cottonwoods had shrunk to a muddy basin where dragonflies skimmed the surface. Henley moved through the days with more weight in her step, though her eyes had steadied, and her shoulders no longer curled in on themselves. Nolan watched her from the fence line as she worked the roan gelding in the corral. She'd fashioned a halter from braided hide and was getting the animal used to her voice, low and even. The horse still shied from sudden movement, but it no longer bolted when she reached for its mane. He leaned into the post, arms folded. You thinking of keeping him? Henley didn't look over. He's not ready for anyone else yet. You might not be either, he said gently. She brushed dust from her palms. I don't aim to be handed off like a saddle. I didn't say that. I know. She came to the fence and rested her hands on the rail beside him. Her skin was sun-dark now, her knuckles calloused. She smelled faintly of horse sweat and creekstone. There's a man west of here, she said. Used to do farrier work for my uncle. I saw him once in town after he'd had too much. He said my folks owed him money. I think he's still looking for something he believes is his. You think he'd come this far? He might, she said. If he hears I'm alive. Nolan looked toward the hills. Then we'll be ready, she tilted her head. He didn't answer, just met her eyes. She didn't ask again. That evening, they sat on the porch while a thunderhead gathered in the far sky, pulsing with distant light. Nolan carved a strip of hickory for a new tool handle, the shavings curling at his feet. Henley had a scrap of canvas across her lap, sewing a patch into the cuff of one of his shirts. You ever think about your ma? She asked. He nodded once. She died before I was grown. What was she like? He set the knife down. She sang while she worked, always humming even when things were bad. She had soft hands, but she could make a man stop dead with one look. Henley grinned. Sounds like someone I'd have liked. She'd have liked you. Henley's fingers paused on the needle. She didn't say anything, just reached over and touched the back of his hand, brief and quiet. The first raindrops fell minutes later. They moved inside without hurry. Nolan lit the lamp, the flame steadying behind the glass. Henley stood near the window, watching the lightning flash across the plains. You ever been kissed properly? She asked, not turning. He set the lamp down. Not in a long time. She turned to him. Do you want to? He stepped forward slowly, like approaching a deer that might bolt if he moved too fast. Only if you do. I wouldn't ask if I didn't. He reached up, cupped her cheek, and kissed her like he meant to stay. Not rushed, not unsure, just steady like everything else he did. When the storm passed, they sat on the bed fully clothed, her head resting against his chest. The air felt cleaner, like the world had wrung itself out and started fresh. I don't want to be afraid anymore, she said. You don't have to be, he said. She closed her eyes. I think I believe that now. He didn't speak again, just held her while the wind eased outside and the night settled around them like a blanket drawn up slow. The August heat settled into the valley like it meant to stay, thick and breathless. The creek had dwindled to a ribbon of slow-moving water, barely enough to fill the buckets. Nolan rigged a canvas shade over the west-facing window to keep the cabin from baking through the afternoons, while Henley dug a trench behind the corral to help drain the overflow from the spring-fed trough. She'd taken to carrying a small notebook in her pocket, dog-eared and stained from sweat. Not for stories, she didn't write like that, but for recording things she wanted to remember. How to twist a wire splice so it held through rain, which plants kept flies off the horses, what days the roan let her touch his ears without flinching. "What's that one for?" Nolan asked one evening, nodding to the page as she sat on the porch steps beside him, pencil balanced between her fingers. "I started writing the things I didn't know I'd need," she said, eyes on the page. "Things no one ever taught me, not because they couldn't. Just because they didn't think I was worth the trouble." He didn't speak, just passed her the tin mug of cooled coffee from his hand. She took it without looking up. She wrote a single word, oakum, and then stopped. "You ever build anything from the ground up?" she asked after a while. "I helped raise the barn with my pa," he said. "Took nearly a month, just the two of us. He made me measure every beam twice before cutting. Said you ought to be able to sleep under something you build, not just stand in it." She nodded slowly. "I want to build something." "What kind?" "Not a house. Not yet. Just something I made with my own hands, something that stays put." She turned the page and began sketching, and he let her be. The next morning, she pulled the old wagon boards from behind the barn and set them out in the sun to dry. Nolan watched her from the paddock as she sorted through the nails, tossing the bent ones into a separate pail. By the second day, she'd built a small frame on the north side of the cabin, just wide enough for a bench and a roof sloped against the wall. She called it her dry place, for sitting when the rain came. When she hammered the last nail into the corner post, she stood back and crossed her arms. "It's crooked," she said. Nolan stepped beside her. "Only a little. I'll fix it." "You could leave it," he said. "Let something lean and still be useful." She looked at him then, serious and quiet. "Maybe." That night he found her asleep under the new overhang, knees drawn up, one arm tucked beneath her head. He didn't wake her, just fetched a blanket and laid it over her shoulders. The days kept on, fence mending, water hauling, saddle oiling. They moved around each other easy now. She knew where he kept the extra nails. He knew not to speak when she was bent over her notebook. One afternoon, he found her down by the creek with her boots off, feet buried in the mud. "You hiding from something?" he asked. "Just thinking." He sat on a flat stone nearby, elbows resting on his knees. "You ever wonder what kind of life this is, really?" she asked. "All this work, day in and day out, no one out here but us and the wind." "I don't wonder," he said. "I chose it." She dug her heel deeper into the muck. "I didn't get to choose much. Not until you cut those chains. You chose to stay." "I did." They sat there as the sun dropped low, the water catching fire in the light. A bullfrog croaked somewhere downstream and a bird rustled in the cattails. "I want a stove of my own one day," she said suddenly. "Not a piece of someone else's kitchen, but one I picked, cast iron with a flat top and an oven that doesn't leak heat." He turned toward her. "That all? And a saddle, not a man's, not a girl's." "Just one that fits me. I can help with that." She looked over, eyes steady. "I know." The wind picked up, tugging at her hair, and she didn't pull it back. He reached out, brushed a dried leaf from her shoulder. "I didn't think I'd find this," she said. "What's this?" "Not just the place." "You." He didn't answer. Just took her hand, and they sat like that until the sky turned violet and the frogs stopped singing. In early September, the days cooled enough for breath to hang in the morning, and the prairie turned brittle yellow with hints of rust where the sumac brushed the fence lines. Henley rose early, not from habit but from ease, a slow, settling kind of rhythm that gave her time to think before the day began. She had taken to shaping the morning bread herself, folding the dough with quiet care as the light crept over the hills. Nolan found her by the stove one morning, flour on her forearm, sleeves rolled back. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her tuck the edges of the dough beneath itself before setting it near the coals. "You ever think you'd live out this way?" he asked. "I used to picture Tennessee hills," she said without turning, "but they never felt like mine. This land does somehow." He crossed the room and set a kettle to heat. "I've been thinking about the west pasture. The fence needs replacing before frost. You want help? I want your opinion on whether it needs a second gate." She turned to him then, brushing flour from her fingers. "I'd put one near the stone rise. Easier to bring cattle down if there's a storm." He nodded. I thought the same. They walked the boundary after breakfast, side by side, the roan gelding trailing behind them without a halter. Henley kept one hand on the hammer slung at her hip, the other tucked into her coat pocket. The air was clean, the kind that held weight without heaviness. At the stone rise, she paused and looked out over the pasture. There's enough land here to run more than cattle. You have something in mind, goats maybe, chickens that can range. I could tan hides, trade some for seed. He studied her profile, the way her jaw set when she thought hard on something. You're planning a life. I suppose I am. Back at the cabin, Nolan pulled a rolled canvas from behind the barn wall. He unwrapped it slowly, revealing a saddle tree bare wood-shaped for a woman's build, narrower at the twist, lighter in the bars. I started it 2 winters ago, he said. Didn't know who I was making it for. Just knew I wanted it to be right. Henley ran her hand along the polished edge, then looked up. You waited. I didn't know what for, just knew I'd know when it was time. She met his gaze, something steady behind her eyes. It's time. That evening they worked beside each other in the lean-to she'd built, stretching rawhide and shaping skirts, her fingers quick with the stitching all, his strong where the tree needed sanding. They didn't speak much, their silence held more than words. As dusk fell, she looked over the half-finished saddle and said, I never thought I'd be part of something that lasted. You are, he said. She reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together with quiet certainty. Neither of them let go. The next day, a rider came up the trail, a man Nolan didn't know, lean and dust-covered, with a rifle strapped across his saddle. He didn't dismount. I'm looking for a girl named Henley Sutton, he said. Nolan stepped forward, calm and firm. What for? She owes a debt. Her uncle died 3 weeks back and his accounts passed to the next of kin. That includes her. Henley appeared behind Nolan, arms folded, gaze direct. I owe nothing. The man's eyes narrowed. Law says otherwise. There's no law that gives you what was never yours, she said. Nolan stepped closer to the horse's flank. You've said your piece. Now turn around. The rider hesitated, then spat into the dust. She's trouble, you'll see. He rode off without another word. Henley watched him disappear into the horizon, then turned to Nolan. He won't be back. He was bluffing. And if he does come again, I'll still be standing. She didn't tremble. She didn't falter. Nolan looked at her then, not for what she'd been through, but for everything she had become. That night he built a fire outside and she brought a blanket. They sat close, knees touching, her head resting against his chest as the flames snapped low. She spoke without lifting her eyes. I want to marry you. He didn't move. You sure? I've been sure since you gave me your bed and took the floor. He pulled her close. Then I'll build you a home with doors that always open and windows that never lock. They married a week later under a cottonwood tree, with the roan gelding standing quiet behind them and the wind rustling dry leaves like a hymn. No preacher came, just a neighbor woman from 2 valleys over who'd once been a midwife and still stood witness when something sacred needed saying. Henley wore a clean cotton dress she'd sewn herself, and Nolan shaved for the first time in months. They spoke their vows low and plain, hands joined, eyes steady. Afterward, they shared blackberry preserves with the neighbors who came, and when the sun dropped low, they danced in the dust to the sound of a fiddle played by a boy with one good boot and a voice full of joy. The cabin changed after that. Henley lined the shelves with jars she'd sealed herself, and Nolan built a cradle for the kid goats she'd bartered from a passing trader. They didn't speak about what had come before there was no need. They knew it, carried it, but they didn't let it live in the center. Years passed. The barn was raised taller. The roan grew gray at the muzzle. Henley's hands grew strong and sure, and Nolan's hair turned silver at the temples, but their eyes never dimmed when they looked at each other. One autumn morning, with the fields ready for clearing, Henley stood on the porch and watched the sun rise. Nolan came out behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and rested his chin on her shoulder. You still glad you stayed? He asked. She leaned into him. Every day. And they lived like that, rooted, open, and whole, together, always.